welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Coach Mo. Hi, Coach. How we doing?
I'm good. How are you, Coach Manny?
I'm good. We've had some troubles to start this podcast, but we're all good now.
Hey, a little adversity always makes the story interesting. So,
Always for the plot.
always for the plot. And a story is no good without an interesting plot. So,
But if you give us a quick rundown on who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are. On the 6th of December, I'll be hosting a webinar on the practical application of sports science data. There's a lot of talk right now about what to track and how to track it, but in this session, we'll dive into why it matters and how we can make it actionable. It's all about how we can apply it to our athletes, how they can apply it to their sport. At the end of the day, that is what matters. Joining us are Thomas Newman, Teofi Ziemnicki, and Missy Mitchell Macbeth. More about our speakers in the description. This is an incredible lineup which will help guide you through the practical sides of sports science and how we can apply it throughout our athlete's career. To grab your ticket and learn more about the webinar, follow the link in the description, and I'll see you there.
yeah, absolutely. So, what's going on, guys? My name is Morgan Cote. I go by Coach Mo. I'm an assistant strength and conditioning coach and football nutrition coordinator at Rice University in Houston, Texas. A little bit about me. I was born not in the United States. I'm from Canada, and I'm actually from Lloydminster, Canada, which is on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's a very, very small town. So small, in fact, that I lived on the Alberta side, but when I was born, the hospital's on the Saskatchewan side. So my birth certificate says I'm from Saskatchewan, but I've never lived there a day in my life. So I lived there and moved to Calgary, Alberta, when I was probably 2 or 3 years old, and moved to Houston, Texas when I was about 10, and grew up in Houston, Texas from then on. And I went to Texas A&M University for my undergraduate degree. I originally was going to school to be an orthopedic surgeon or a neuroscientist, and decided about halfway through my time there that I really didn't want to spend my life in a book, that I wanted to be in the trenches. So I had a former mentor of mine suggest that I'd be a good strength and conditioning coach. And I kind of never looked back after that. When I was done my years at Texas A&M, I packed everything that I owned into a car, and what didn't fit, I sold and drove all the way up to New Haven, Connecticut, where I worked at Yale University as a sports performance intern under Coach Thomas Newman, which was on Coach Manny's podcast as well. And spent about 6 months there. Came back here to Houston, Texas, and was an intern at Rice University for their football program. Excuse me. After I was done with that, I went to Tarleton State University as a GA for their football, men's basketball, cheer, and dance programs. I did a small stint out in California at Fresno State as a coaching assistant before I got the call to come back here to be a full time strength and conditioning coach for the football program and the swim and dive teams here. So I've been here about 3 years now, and I'm excited to share my experiences with you guys.
As a strength coach and a business owner, my time is quite limited. My favorite part about being a coach is the fact that I get to interact with athletes and be with athletes and really coach them. That's why I use TeamBuildr. I remember the days of searching for exercises, manually typing them in, and spending hours on spreadsheets and organizing my programs. This tends to be quite tedious and a lot of time consuming, which meant that I wasn't able to coach as much. So now for my business, TeamBuildr is a non-negotiable. It's an all-in-one programming platform that lets you create and deliver workouts to your athletes just in a few clicks. With TeamBuildr, I can customize programs, track athletes' progress in real time, and generate performance reports. My athletes get full ownership of their progress and can even share feedback on how they felt the session's going. Having this in place actually gives me more time to coach and be with my athletes. If you're ready to take your next step in your programming, give more time to your athletes, head over to teambuildr.com and use promo code PAChalkup, that's PACHALQUP, and start your 30-day free trial. Love it. And it's something that we always talk about. It's that how small the actual industry is, and how, like, obviously Tom has been on the podcast and he's a great guy. It was a phenomenal episode. But then you were also in Fresno where Coach Mark, who's my biggest mentor, had just left. Like, maybe the month that you arrived. It's so fascinating to me that it's like you know everyone. You just have to speak to the right people.
Oh, absolutely. And I love when we originally talked about it because as I was like kind of giving you my background, you were like, wait, hold on, do you know this person? And I'm like, I do know that person. And it's just, it's so interesting how small this world actually is and how small it gets smaller and smaller every day. I kind of feel like, especially the more and more people you run into, the more and more connections you realize you actually have.
100%. This is what's so awesome about the podcast. Like, I'll have people like follow me, and they're like, they already follow a bunch of people that I follow, and I'm like, oh, how's like, and then I chase the connection. I'm like, sick. So it's like, it's just nice to see that like it is such a like a close knit, very small industry, and we're all just like helping and supporting each other through it as well. That's sick to me.
Exactly. And I think that's really at the end of the day why I fell in love with strength and conditioning because we're all doing the same thing, going after the same goal, trying to make athletes better. And I think when you have an overarching goal like that, it's not very individualized for the most part. At the end of the day, we're here to make kids better. And when you have that understanding, it makes relationships so much better in and amongst other coaches. So it's pretty cool.
If you talk to us a little bit about the neuroscience background and like how that has sort of shaped your path in S&C.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was at Texas A&M, I actually minored in neuroscience, and my introduction to neuroscience was kind of not really the best, or maybe a sad approach to it. But when I was in high school, my dad actually had a major stroke, and when I showed up to the hospital, he looked at me, and you could tell he knew who I was, but he couldn't get out the words like to say my name. And when I would ask him, like the doctor asked when his birthday was, and he couldn't say his birth date, it was just really obviously heart wrenching to me to watch the man in my life who's raised me to be the strength coach that I am today, the tough, the tough badass that I am today, sit there and not be able to get his birthday out or my name out of his mouth. So it was a real shock for me, and it just kind of sent me down this path of understanding neuroscience and the details of it and what part of his brain was actually affected. So after he was done, I did a lot of research on cognitive training to actually rehabilitate people after they've had strokes or PTSD, epilepsy, things like that. So cognitive development actually started there, and neurofeedback training is a big area that they use, and brain endurance training, things like that, to help rehab stroke and patients with epilepsy, things of that nature. But it got me thinking. I was like, what if we could use this in sports and actually get on the front side of neurodevelopment and actually make these athletes more effective at making decisions under high pressure situations? And that's exactly what I did. So when I first got to Rice, I started working with our quarterbacks and kind of implemented some cognitive drills to really help their decision making loop in their brain called the OODA loop. And it made them really effective at making decisions in the pocket and helped them operate on the fly under high stress. So it's been something that we've been really developing here at Rice University. My swimmers also use a lot of these techniques as well. So it's been really cool to see the evolution of this program since the day that I decided in that hospital that I wanted to implement neuroscience into strength conditioning.
Yeah. How what do the drills sort of look like and how are they implemented for their program?
Yeah, so there's three different areas that I really focus on. One of them is neurofeedback. So that is actually an EEG unit that we put on the players to help them auto-regulate their brain activity. And we use that in conjunction with meditation. We also use it in conjunction with VR to help them actually auto-regulate their brain activity while in situations that are similar to the field. Then we do things like brain endurance training, which is post practice or post weight room sessions that are cognitive games to induce mental fatigue so that we can actually teach their brains how to basically outlast their physical fatigue by increasing their rate of mental, I guess you could say, endurance. And then there's cognitive drills, which we actually go through, and depending on the athlete and what they struggle with or what their stressors are on an individual basis, we develop drills to help them work around those individual stressors that are similar to their field of play. So one of the drills, for example, one of my quarterbacks was struggling with stress when he felt pocket pressure. So we actually developed a drill that was similar and basically elicited this idea of pocket pressure so that his brain could put together the proper loop to know how to make the decision when he was actually in that such situation on the field, plus all the emotions that run high on the field. So it's basically
Mhm.
what it is. It's just, when you go to download a new app on your phone and the phone says, hey, before you can download this new app, you have to update your phone. Really, all I'm doing is just updating their phones. I'm just updating their brains to be able to take in this new information and know how to actually work through those situations.
When it comes to the mental fatigue and mental endurance, how are they paired?
Yeah, so when you do a really hard like training session, and I'll just use it from the perspective of a quarterback. You're doing a really hard training session. It's hot outside, especially in we're in Texas, so the Texas heat. That's all weighing on you in physical fatigue, and your mental fatigue along with your physical fatigue is kind of almost parallel. So the whole point of brain endurance training is to keep your mental fatigue kind of stagnant across time as your physical fatigue starts to weigh. So we play rugby. I played rugby when I was at Texas A&M, and I know you play. But when you're talking about a 45-minute half of nonstop running, but you still got to make the decisions on the fly, that is essentially what that endurance piece is doing, is making sure that your mental fatigue outlasts the physical fatigues on the field.
How are you developing that mental endurance?
So one of the drills that we actually use is the Stroop test. So they will come in after a practice and they will sit there and they'll do a couple rounds of Stroop, but we will also make it specific to their position. So, for example, if you guys know what the Stroop test is, there's two words on the bottom that are either red or green, and then there's a word on the top that's red or green. And whatever the word is highlighted on the top, like the shade of the color red or green, you have to pick the word of the shade of the color, or of the shade of the word on the top. So your brain is sorting through multiple pieces of information, but then I have a cone with a tennis ball on it, and they have a tennis ball in their hand. So as they're going through and they're playing the game, then I'll say pocket pressure. And then they have to switch the tennis ball on the cone. So you're adding this element of chaos to their game to react to new and incoming information while they're doing this cognitive task. So we try and always take these like brain endurance training games that we do and always make it position specific. Another one that we do is that we actually use a Striber unit, which is a VR unit for
Mm.
film, and we put the guy's film in the Striber unit along with the EEG. So while they are watching their films or watching their kicks for our kickers, they actually have to get their brain activity back down before they go through their steps and watch the ball go through the uprights. Post practice, after you've been tired, is very mentally fatiguing. And my kicker has actually been doing it for what are we, week 10 now, since the season started, 10 weeks, and he comes back and he gets a score of 70% plus calm now, because he is able to actually outweigh the mental effects of practice on top of what we ask him to do post practice. So it's been pretty
Um,
cool to integrate that and get the
Mhm.
kickers and quarterbacks feedback as we do that.
What does that do to their educational as well? Because like obviously they're still student athletes, so they're physically tired, mentally tired, but they're also working on that cognitive piece, which allows them to take more on. How does that sort of impact them?
Yeah, so here at Rice, we're highly academic. So these kids are already smart as heck. So they not only go to school all day, they come in, they practice, they're physically fatigued all day, especially on days when we have lift as well as practice, right? So it's all about just knowing the athlete, like coming in and talking to them and saying, hey, how are you feeling today? Oh, I had a midterm last night. I only got 3 hours of sleep. Then as a cognitive professional at that point, I probably wouldn't do, the cognitive training with them post practice, because that would just be too much mental fatigue for them. It's all about dosing. It's no different than what we would do in the weight room, right? The brain is a muscle at the end of the day, and we train muscles. So you have to treat it just like you would any other training session under a barbell. Like, what is too much and what is too little, and understanding what each individual athlete will need.
You also mentioned that you use them with your swimmers and divers. How is that implemented with them?
Yeah, so there's actually a setting, and it's cool because the company that I've partnered with is called Muse, and they built me a custom soundscape. Well, I partnered with them to build a custom soundscape for the boys that is stadium noise. So when they sit there and they auto regulate their brain activity, the higher their brain activity goes, the louder the crowd gets. The crowd starts booing and it feels a little bit more stressful. And then as they're able to calm down their brain activity, then the crowd starts cheering for them again. They start hearing clapping in the background to put them in more of a, what we call a medium transfer setting. So doing like the Stroop test is what we would call a far transfer. A lot of those cognitive tasks sometimes don't always transfer over to specific things on the field, whereas practice is near transfer, right? You're doing everything in a cognitive setting to understand the game. What we do is medium transfer. So for my swimmers, there's actually a water setting. And it kind of
Mm,
sounds like beach and it's waves. So it puts them in a setting that they're familiar with where they can sit there and hear the water. And as their brain activity gets high, the water starts moving quicker. You can hear it in the background, gets louder in the background. And then they have to sit there and calm themselves down. And they actually do it poolside. So they sit there in
mm,
their environment and do it poolside before they actually compete. So it's been pretty cool to have them implement that as well.
yeah. What's that then done for their performance?
So keep in mind, like, cognitive training is very subjective. It is very based on each individual athlete and how they perceive stress. So they get to dose these cognitive tasks as they see fit in and around their competition. So the swimmer that does our Muse unit actually does it pre-practice because she feels like it helps her calm down. You know, with the
Mm,
constant demands of being a student athlete, especially at a highly academic school like this, it's a lot. So for her to sit there and actually become more self-aware of what's going on in her head, it's incredibly important when you're about to go on the blocks and have to make some big time game decisions to make sure that you come out on the other side with the dub. And it's no different for the boys, right? When you're back there as a QB and you're looking for your reads down the field, but also you got to read the defense and coach is yelling at you from the sidelines. Oh, by the way, the DN's coming in and oh, the countdown clock's running. I got to snap the ball. That's a lot of stress and anxiety. But if you can sit there before the snap and take your breath and get your brain activity back down, what that actually does is spike dopamine in your blood. And the
mm.
more dopamine you have in your blood, the more likely you are to make great decisions. So it's been cool to kind of see that subjective response. And yesterday at practice, my quarterback actually didn't come in time to do his VR session before practice. I asked him how he did after practice, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to go back to doing the VR pre-practice. I just felt like I wasn't locked in." But again, that's what works for him, and it's no different than the weight room. You always want to dose it in a way that is going to be beneficial for them and add to them, not take away from them.
How does that then translate over to their weightlifting program or the current program that they have?
So that's kind of the next layer to all of this. Would I love to get cognitive training more involved with their weightlifting sessions? Yes, absolutely. Because after being under a barbell and you're seeing Tweety birds running around your face, like I want them to be able to. Oh my gosh, the amount of Tweety birds I've seen in my life, like, but I want them to be able to hit a set of squat and then turn around and do a session on the Stroop because that's no different than what we would do post practice as brain endurance training. But you're talking about post practice effects versus you just got out from under a barbell. They're two different things, right? So seeing the effects of that brain endurance training on our weightlifting sessions would be something that I definitely want to venture into as we develop this program.
I think Thomas has had quite nice results from it. He uses a different device, but he's talking like specifically in meetings. Like you can tell if people are interested or not, like with the device that he is, and like the way he uses it, it's more like card games straight after. So like I forget the exact protocol, but it's something like they'll do a heavy set of squats, turn, and there's like card showing. So it's very interesting the way that it's going. So like I always love talking about it because it's that emergent thing. It's like that next key that unlocks more performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing that I would love to see is one of the drills right now that I do with the quarterbacks is I have their index cards about this big and they have a letter on them. And each letter has four different colors and it's all the whole alphabet, right? So they're all taped up on a black wall in our weight room. And the quarterback will sit there kind of far back from the wall and I'll say, green G. And he has to take his eyes across the wall in an effective manner to scan through this information to find the green G. So imagine trying to do that, filtering through hundreds of pieces of information on a wall after you've just hit a PR under a barbell. It's a lot harder, right? But if you can do it after PRing under a barbell, then you can definitely do it when you go out onto the field. And you definitely didn't just get out from under a barbell.
100%. And it's fascinating because like your brain has to intake so much information during a performance. Like, am I cutting left and getting away from this guy? But if I do that, then I might get hit by the DB or whoever's coming at me. There's so much data going in that you're kind of like, at this point it's kind of like you're in a stone age if you don't use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, like the brain only can process 7 pieces of active information at one time. So as you take in information and decide whether it's important or not, right, you can take in 3 or 4 pieces of information at one time, but then your brain's discarding the fact that the DN's coming because the lineman got over there and blocked him. Okay, I don't need to worry about that anymore. What's the next piece of information that I need to worry about? And your brain is automatically doing that and discarding information that doesn't matter, but also going back into the hippocampus and pulling forward memories from the last time this happened on how you can effectively make a good decision. There's so much going on in there. And keep in mind, the prefrontal cortex, which sits right behind the forehead, doesn't finish developing until you're 25, and that is where every piece of decision making, emotional regulation happens. So if we can optimize cognitive performance while that portion of these kids' brain is still developing until the age of 25, and increase neuroplasticity in that area, they're going to have a better time understanding how to make really tough decisions in high stress situations.
Yeah, and like a way that I think about it, it's like it's adding in hypertrophy to a program to develop like the size of the muscle, so then you can contract strength and power to make it more functional. I think people think associate the brains to like different ways of training, but like they are both muscles. They are both effectively doing the same thing. Just one's processing at very different speeds. So like if we get away from like really considering it as a muscle and going through, okay, I need it to have the capacity to have more information in, so I need to do this. If does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so one of the things that we started doing here was in our camps, we started putting together just kind of like intake testing for our quarterbacks and understanding like how their brains actually process information because that has a lot to do with how you were raised, what you value, what your personality type is, right? Like there's a lot of like the psychological side of things that have a huge impact on it. And not to be confused, this cognitive training it's not psychology. There's a difference
Mm,
between psychology and cognitive development. Now we bring in some of the psychology side of it with these intake tests and trying to understand how these quarterbacks perceive information. One of the drills is actually connect the dots. So I'll give them
mm,
a color assignment on a piece of paper that's got 5 or 6 different colors on there with 10 of each color, like dots across the page. And you can tell by the way the quarterback looks at the page if he rotates the page, he's analytical and he's going to decide like how he's going to make the decision to connect the dots across the page. Or you'll have the quarterback that just worries about the end goal and he'll take the page from you and he'll start on the first yellow dot that he sees and he'll try and connect them up across the page, but it's very chaotic. Whereas another quarterback will take a look at it and he'll create a shape based on
mm,
the dots on the page. So it kind of gives you an idea on how these quarterbacks are, like you saying, taking in this information and how they're sorting it out and what's important to them, what's not important to them. And then that gives you a better insight on how you can develop these cognitive drills to make them more effective at taking in proper information, right? I think that's the big thing about cognitive training that everyone forgets is you can take in all this information, but if you're taking information that's not important and it's not critical in that moment,
mm,
then that's where the bad decisions come in. So it's been really cool to start to like put together all of these like I guess parameters for a lot of things as far as like quarterbacks goes, but it's also very different for kickers, right? There's certain cognitive tendencies that you want in kickers. They got to be calm, they got to be self-aware, they got to be these things that you want to look for so that when you look at that in your players, you understand how to dive into that cognitive training a little bit more.
how big is the hydration piece then when it comes to these drills and these implementations?
Yeah, hugely important. There's actually, we talked about this last time. There's a recent research paper that came out about the correlation between hydration and cognitive performance. And they actually found that if you're severely dehydrated or even remotely dehydrated, your cognitive performance goes way down. Now we can get into like all the scientific. As I say, you're doing better than me as I hydrate with caffeine, but there's a strong correlation with being hydrated and mental performance and being able. We could get, like I said, we could get into the science of it, right? Like neurotransmitters and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that you need to understand at the end of the day is if you are dehydrated, your body is going to allocate energy to the proper functionalities of your body for survival. And the first thing that's going to go is cognitive performance, right? Your body is more focused on cooling itself down because you're not hydrated to cool itself down, especially in Texas. It's so hot. So the first thing that's going to go is cognitive performance. And one of the ways that we battle that at Rice is actually feeding the guys throughout practice. So we bring in things like gummy worms and Sour Patch watermelons that we give them throughout practice because A, that's going to make them thirstier. So it's going to make kind of force them to drink. But also sour candy is actually a neurological reset. So they say if you have an anxiety attack, you should actually eat sour candy because it'll neurologically reset you to be able to like calm yourself down a little bit better. So it's been one of the things that we've had to battle in the Texas heat, but
Mhm.
nothing that we can't handle for sure.
That's the thing that, again, a lot of people don't realize is like how much you actually need to fuel and eat to keep up with these performances. Like, I remember at UW, I I would watch like the amount of stuff that these guys eat, like before practice, during practice, after practice, and then they would have their lunch and like the portions of their lunch, and then we would see like the whole afternoon side of it, like just like their post practice shakes are like 1,500 calories. I'm like, that's a bit excessive, and the nutrition was like, yes, but they need it, and I was like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it's so crazy. I can't keep up with these boys. So I'm football nutrition coordinator here, so I order the day in and day out snacks, the sideline nutrition, like our prepackaged meals, our snacks for the hotel. Like that's all my responsibility. And I have never spent so much time on the Costco website. Those people hate me there. They hate me because when I put in an order, it's usually their entire warehouse. I promise you. But I used to do shakes for the guys as well. And Manny, I'm telling you, I was putting full Pop Tarts in their
Hmm.
shakes and crumbling Pop Tarts on top of their shakes just to get them calories to hold on. Because keep in mind, too, with the Texas heat, you are shedding weight.
Hmm.
So anything that you could eat to even remotely put calories and weight back on these kids, we were trying to do because these kids just couldn't keep weight on their body. It's incredibly important. And you're talking about abnormal humans, right? Like linemen that are 6'6", 350 pounds. Like that's just not normal human beings. So you got to take a not normal human being and add the fact that they're an athlete on top of that
Athlete.
and trying to fuel them. So
I'll, this is one of like when I realized American athletes are different. Like I was in the football program, so I don't know if it was just them, but like I had a center who was 18 years old, ate like a motherfucker, but he was throwing out like 22 pieces on the 225 test. I was like, what is your mom feeding you? Like, what did she do to develop this? And like, I had another one who he left the year I left to play in the NFL, and he's like 6'8". He is a humongous human, and like the thing is, well, they're nice as anything too. Like, if you speak to them, they're just like children. They're nice, and I'm just like, oh, all right.
yeah, teddy bears is what I call them. Absolute teddy bears. Like again, my O lineman who I was talking about, he's 6'5", 6'6", 350 plus pounds. Absolute teddy bear of a human being. Oh, and by the way, he's going to be an orthopedic surgeon one day. I was like, I would trust you to replace my hip any day. I'll trust you. you could probably like pick me up with two fingers and place me on the operating table. Like, you know, these guys are so big, but that's the thing that I've learned about, like, especially like O line, a little bit less D line. D line, you gotta be a little bit nasty, but like O linemen, that's their job, is to protect, right?
Mm,
So they call me weight room mama Coach Mo, that group, and it's just so funny to watch their bigger than life personalities, but also I've never seen grown men put away food like that. It's kind
yeah.
of scary, but it's kind of awesome at the same time.
No, like, and this is what I love about like athletes as well, especially those that have like experienced that dark side of performance and really going the extra mile to like protect or finish that set piece up. Because like, if you've experienced that dark side, and me and Thomas spoke about this thoroughly, it's like you kind of like choose what battles you want to actually engage with. Like you make educated decisions on like where your time is best allocated.
Exactly. And I think this goes to speak in life too. If you don't understand how to go through the dark things, the hard times, understanding the value in that during the time that you're experiencing it is so important for these athletes. And being able to make that decision that you're going to lean into it is also incredibly important. Most people go through those like really dark times and develop fear around a lot of things. But what people don't understand is that fear is so good. Like as a
Mm,
strength coach over the years, like, yeah, I've had a lot of fearful experiences. I mean, when I moved to Fresno, Manny, I sold everything I had. I left my car here. I bought a one-way plane ticket. I had one suitcase and my cat. And I flew out there and they dropped me off at the airport and I was like, what do I do now? Like, but I leaned into the fear, bought a bike. I would bike my way to work every morning through, I didn't know where I was, California, but I did it because I knew that the process that I was going through was preparing me for the next steps. And I think if you can find the beauty in those really kind of
mm.
difficult, fearful times, then it's going to make you a better human being, a better strength coach, a better football player, if you can understand how to use quote unquote the darkness to your advantage.
Yeah, and like I think we as strength coaches as well, and we're kind of speaking about this off the podcast as well. Like, although it's a very fast growing industry, there's still not that much money in it, and a lot of these internships that you get into are free. Like, you are not getting paid a single penny. Like most that some teams might do is like either supplement in your nutrition or give you some snacks to keep you going through it. Like apart from that, you get nothing. So you have to wake up every morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, and be like, I have to go to work, which I'm not getting paid for. I then work until like midday. I leave. I still need to live. I need money somehow. So I need to get another job to offset this career path that I'm going to. Then you're kind of investing in like a future way down the line sort of investment. And it's kind of like it's scary because you don't know where the finish line is, but you know that it will at some point come. And it's yeah, the S&C world is can make or break a coach, but it's like if you couldn't do it, probably not in the best industry for you.
Yeah, and I think that's anything in life. Like, to give you a great example, so when I was in college, and I told this to one of my boys the other day, and he looked at me and he was like, there's no way, Coach Mo. But I used to weigh 300 pounds.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and I worked my way back from that. But when you start in that kind of a place where, like you say, you look down the tunnel and you can't even see the light at the end, but you know that you got to keep going. Otherwise, you're going to stay there forever, right? Like you have to keep going. You have to wake up every morning and know that it's not going to happen that day, but it'll probably happen at some point. And if you keep telling yourself, oh, I can do it, I can do it. Like if I was to tell myself, oh, I can lose weight, I can lose weight. I actually fucking hate that saying. Oh, you can do it. I actually
Mm,
hate that because it leaves this kind of like suggestion that there might be a possibility where you don't. It's like,
yeah.
no, I will do this. I will. Because that indicates that at some point down the line, it will happen for you. And so for me, like, I was 300 pounds and now I'm like 175 pounds. And in the best shape of my life, I run 12 to 15 miles a week. I lift every day. So to go from that point where you're like I don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel, but valuing being in the darkness and what it's
Hmm.
teaching you is so important for your development as an athlete, as a human being, as a coach. Like when I moved to Yale, I lived in a 3 bedroom, 1 bath apartment with 5 people to afford to be there. And I would do it again. I would do it again tomorrow because the tough times that I experienced there, the tough lessons that I experienced there, I leaned into because I knew that if I didn't learn something from that, that I wouldn't be prepared for where I am now.
Hmm.
So it's all in perspective, right? Like
Yeah.
stress isn't bad, it's how you perceive it.
Mhm. There's always two sayings that I have. One of them is "shy boys don't get sweets," which that's the motto that's carried me to where I am now. Like when the opportunity for the US came, I was like, "Fuck yeah, let's go!" Even like I was like, "There's no fucking way I'm getting this." The worst that's going to happen is I get a no, right? So I was like, "Yeah, fuck it." So I applied, got it, but it was all that principle: "Shy boys don't get sweets." The second one is "yet." The word "yet" is very fucking powerful. Like I don't have this yet. I don't have this skill yet. Because that gives you, again, like you were mentioning, that space to it's coming, just not right now. But it is coming.
Yeah, and you'll never know when. You're never guaranteed a win. But
Mm,
if you do it, you're guaranteed it at some point if you do the work. But if you don't do the work, you're guaranteed that you never will get it. And that's
mm,
the difference. Most people that understand the high level of what it means to be successful do the work every day and know that they probably won't get a reward, right? And that's the thing. It's not the intensity at which you do something, it's the volume. You
mm.
can go and you can do a really hard workout one day and then question. That's like the biggest issue right now is like they're like people are like, "Oh, well, I don't see results from the 1 hour workout that I did." It's like,
With my
well,
abs.
yeah, yeah, where's my six pack? I'm like, it's not the intensity at which you do something, it's the volume. How long can you go until you finally get the result? And it wasn't like for me in my journey, it wasn't like one day I just woke up and was like, okay, made it, sick. No, it's been an
Mm,
ongoing journey because I think Sebum just actually talked about it in a recent podcast that he was on in Modern Wisdom. It's this concept
mm,
of false peaking. You know what that is?
yeah.
It's like where you get to the top and then you realize, oh, well, this really isn't the top because there's another peak I gotta get to. You're not summiting, right? The summit of a mountain is the very, very tippy top, but a mountain can have multiple peaks.
I sent you a video of Ross Hedgley and the philosopher of the philosophy of I forgot the name. Um, but it's like he was rolling up. He managed to trick all the gods for so long, even death. But death eventually came for him, and his punishment was to push this boulder up this hill. And as soon as he got to the top of the hill, the ball would roll back down, and he'd have to start again. But then it was further developed into yeah. But imagine him tricking the gods one more time by smiling the whole way. And it's like no matter how hard the journey gets or this part gets, like smile through it because at some point you will look back and be like, yeah, those were tough times. I thought I peaked. I thought I was at the best, but there's actually still to unlock.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because part of our cognitive evaluation process of our quarterbacks, one of the things we do is we give them 3 words. We give them a word that's means like is related to intrinsic motivation. We give them a word that's goal oriented, and then we give them a word that's process oriented, and they have to rank them. And we find that the best quarterbacks out there are the quarterbacks that pick the process oriented word first and the goal oriented word last. The best quarterbacks out there are not the ones that love the touchdowns, they love the reads.
Hmm. So this is something that I spoke to two psychology GAs previously, and they introduced me to this notion of motivation isn't like you either have one or the other, right? You will always have an intrinsic motivational factor. You will also always have an extrinsic motivating factor. Like there may be different levels, but it's more like a wave as opposed to like a straight line in either direction. So like some days you could be like, I really want to win because this team bet us last week, and that's fucking me up. Like I have to win for me to prove to myself that I can do it. But then there's like, yeah, but if I win this game, I might get picked for the Scottish squad or whatever it is. So that's then extrinsic, and it's like that battle of people love to go one way or the other, and often coaches will always push their athletes to intrinsic motivations, but it's like also know how to use your extrinsic ones. Like I start, and I learned this from Coach Mack, is like I start every athlete sitting down and be like, what's your goals for this season? What's your end goal for your performance? Like what's driving you? If I can see that they're struggling one day, like I'm going to use that extrinsic to get them to that place. Like I thought you wanted to become an NFL player. Like where's that energy now? You need that energy now to do it. And it's more like it's knowing how to adequately use both to get them there. Does that make sense?
1,000%. And I think they influence each other, right?
Hmm.
The boys hate doing this with me, but there's a thing that I do, and I call it the game of why. So I'll
Mm,
be like, "Hey, so and so, why do you play football?" "Oh, because I love the game." "Well, I love the violent nature of the game. Why?" "Well, I play." And they every time I ask, they're like, "Well, I just gave you the answer." It's like, "No, you didn't. You said you love the game. Why do you love the game?"
hmm.
"Well, I love the game because I played it since I was a kid." "Why?" "Well, because my dad introduced me to it." "Well, because my dad was an NFL player." "Why do you play football?" "Well, I play football because that's what my dad did, and my dad's gone now, and there's and you keep going. Okay, well, why do you play football when your dad's gone?" "Well, I support my family." "Well, because my mom's this," and you just keep going, and you keep pulling away these layers. And yeah, at first and each layer will provide whether it's an extrinsic motivation or an intrinsic motivation. And sometimes
Hmm.
they influence each other. Like your intrinsic motivation is to, or extrinsic, excuse me, your extrinsic motivation is to make money in the league. Why? Well, it's to take care of my family. That's intrinsic motivation. I want to support my family, and that means I have to have an intrinsic motivation to make money, right? So there's this constant influence of each other. But as a strength coach, I found playing the game of why has really helped me understand who these boys truly are.
I don't know if you've read the conscious coaching book, but like that is my Bible. Like when and it's not really a strength and conditioning book. It's a psychology book that is for strength coaches. But and it's exactly like verbatim what you just said. I did with an athlete. Like he was the first one in, first one out every single day, and he kept to himself most of the time. Like he wouldn't really interact with any other coaches apart from like the main ones. But for some reason, me and him really clicked, and I do thank that book specifically for it because like I identify everyone that I have in the weight room as soon as like I can piece it together. He was one of them that I pieced really quickly, and we just got on like a house of fire. But there was one day where it was just me, him. There was a couple people around the gym, but it was just like me and him. And I asked him like, why are you first in, first out? Like why? Like why do you work so hard? Like you already do the practices. The practices are hard, but then you come in and do extra. Why? And again, went back to because I need to support my sisters, my mom. Like I'm doing it for them, and I was like, for some kids, that's what's the most important thing.
It's crazy too, the answers that you'll get, because I remember the one day I was playing the game with them, and they all know now, right? Like they're all like, "All right, why do you play football?" "Because I want to be the best." "Why? Why do you want to be the best?" Because, and like they've gotten to a point now where they can give me an answer that's actually truthfully philosophical. "Coach Mo,
Mm,
I want to be the best because I not only want to prove to myself that the work over the years that I've put in have been for nothing and for my family and will promote a proper life for the next generations of my, and it just goes, right? And you're like, okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? Like now I'm truthfully understanding why you do this. And then as
mm,
a coach, I can help you achieve that, right? And it was funny because the one day I came in and one of my athletes was like, "Coach Mo, why are you strength coach?" And I was like,
mm,
"Oh, here we go. Okay, I see you. I see you." But like they start thinking about those things on a much deeper level. and understanding, because I think a lot of these kids and even coaches nowadays, they don't have that conversation with themselves. They don't have
Mm,
that reflection with themselves. And so a lot of things that they do are very surface level. And they fall for a lot of these things that they see in the world because they've not addressed their true values of who they actually are and what they stand for. And when you operate like that, you kind of walk through life blindly and you're subject to everything and anything like information wise that you're taking in. So it's been
yeah, just
really cool to kind of like play that game with them because you just really get to know people at their core.
yeah, and like this is something that I kind of mentioned when we were going back and forward. It's the immigrant mentality. Now, I didn't
Yes.
dive much into this because I wanted to talk it about here. So, the immigrant mentality is this theory that immigrants that obviously go into a whole new country, like doesn't really matter if it's like a non-speaking like native language or not. You essentially want to, and then again, not everyone, majority of immigrants want to provide a better life for their family, a better situation for what they're currently doing in their home country. So it's that mentality that no matter what job I'm doing, I'm going to do it so fucking well that there's not going to be one that's like better than me in this role right now. Like at this job, I am the best. And it's that constant pursuit of wanting to do more and better for your family that you essentially work harder and harder to prove yourself that I am the fucking best.
I love that. And I think me and you have a very unique perspective on this, just both not being from the US, but have been in the US to some capacity, right? Because,
I mean, I'm Portuguese as well. Like the UK isn't like I was born in Portugal,
mhm,
so like no one can tell because I speak very well English.
yeah,
Um, but like even like the UK isn't my home. Like I
right.
am from Portugal, so it's like yeah. But like you're 100% right.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because I think for me, when I came here, my parents kind of didn't put this on me, but you kind of assume when you're a kid, right? Like that. And this was also something I heard in a podcast where you're told when you're young you can do anything. And so it almost puts these like unwritten expectations that you have to be something. But it's the same thing with being an immigrant. When I came here, everyone told me, "Oh, well, you're not from this country. You don't belong here. You know, you won't make it because you're not even supposed to be here to begin with." Blah 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 blah. And keep in mind, I moved here in '07. I didn't become, well, back up a little bit. I didn't get my green card until 2015.
Hmm.
So when I was going to college, I almost got deported because I didn't get my green card in time and I had to go back. I would have had to go back and apply for a student visa to come back. But I got my green card, couldn't start working in the United States until I was 18, and then didn't become a citizen of the United States until 2021. So from '07 to 2021, I was dealing with that, trying to become a citizen of the United States. So that was a lot for my family, for my parents to go through. And it's this unwritten expectation like, we are doing this to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to be successful in life. So you better be something successful. You better be a doctor. You better be a lawyer. You better be these things. And I think that when I didn't become one of those things, it was really shocking for my parents because they were like, what the F?
Mm.
But now it's cool to see because my parents have evolved beyond this point of understanding that it's not just so surface level like that. And they see all the interactions that I have with my athletes and the fact that I'm one of three ish, I think, women across the United States at the FBS level doing this job. And it's been really cool to watch my parents also evolve, right? It's not just been me, it's also my parents, it's my family back home who, keep in mind, football in Canada is, yeah, we have the CFL, but it's hockey there. Let's be honest, right? Like to see my family and my extended family get invested in football because I'm doing it. So it's been really cool and it's been a very unique perspective, especially when I was getting into football, because I mean, I didn't grow up with football. I kind of happened into it, and my personality fit the culture that was the collegiate football weight room. So I don't know what your experience was coming over from overseas. Because I mean, I'm from Canada. It's one border away. Like, it's very different being from the North Hemisphere than it is probably coming from overseas. Like, what was your experience like?
Uh, a little. So for me, I am a rah coach. Like I love the football atmosphere because it's like what I'm comfortable with. So like if I wasn't, I can presume it would be very shocking. Like when so the first session we had, and I arrived late to the internship because of, funnily enough, Canada. Um,
That
but
was such a great story, by the way.
the things that frustrate me is like at the end he was like, "Oh, sick opportunity, off you go." I'm like, "Fuck you,
Like,
fuck
bro,
you."
no.
So for me, it was like the first session was like a freshman session, and it was like them getting introduced to like what our sessions look like, and I was like, "Ah, home," because like for me, it was just like it was rah rah over the top. And I'm like, this is fucking sick. So like, but the things that mostly shocked me was like the size of the people here, portion sizes, like wild, salt context, also very wild. So much more salt in foods.
Really?
Yeah, like
That's
I was like,
interesting.
God damn. Um,
It's like I'm gonna
but
catch a coronary over here.
this was in Seattle. I can only imagine like places like Texas or like
Oh,
South where it's like heavily barbecued, very like intense flavors.
we build them
Um,
different in Texas. Okay, everything's bigger in Texas.
That's why I hear. But it's like for them, most of them were like, "Oh, let me hear your British accent," and I'm like, first of all, I'm from Scotland. If I speak Scottish, then you're definitely not going to understand me. What you're referring to is like a very like specific London accent, and it's
Hmm.
horrible, very posh.
Very
Um,
close.
we don't sound like that. They're just like, oh, I was like, yeah. So they probably had the biggest shock than me. But yeah, no, like America was amazing because like I got to see what investing in sport does for athletes and the way that a whole culture is built around it. And you kind of mentioned, and I kind of want to go back into like how you develop that culture within Rice and how that has sort of evolved during the years since you are like one of three female coaches in this industry.
Yeah, so Rice has been a great experience, and that's why, like, when I got the call from my current boss, Coach Hans, to come back and be full time here, it was no doubt in my mind that I was coming back. Rice is different, and the love that the boys have for each other and for the coaching staff here, it's very, very different. And in fact, one of our transfers was telling me this the other day and why he chose us over other schools that were looking at him. Because he was like, I walked into this building and you could tell that everyone loved each other and everyone played for each other. And it's just a little bit different here. And it's just kind of hard to explain unless you're in it. So when
Mm,
I first came back here, like keep in mind, before that, I had been an intern. And it's interesting because as soon as I walked into the building, it was like I never left. And when you have that type of relationship with your boys, it's really hard or it's really easy to develop a great standard right from the jump. And one of the sayings that I have and quotes that I personally live by is culture is created by those who find value in being.
mm,
I've always been a little bit different. My whole life, I've always kind of considered myself a little bit of a black sheep. But that's what makes culture so fun, right? And that's what makes college football so fun because people buy into these weird, like Texas A&M style cultures. Like being a former Aggie, everyone's like, "Oh, you're a cult." I'm like, "Yeah, I am. I'm part of a cult, and it's a great culture to be a part of because the amount of back end connections, people that I've met. I mean, when I pass away, hopefully not anytime soon, obviously, but when I pass away, there's a tradition at Texas A&M called muster, where they will say my name and everyone will echo here. Like it's weird stuff. Don't get me wrong, but when you talk about developing culture, that's what you're investing in. You're investing in something that's a little bit different, and you have to find value in being different in order to develop culture.
yeah, the best. It's a cult. and culture builder is this CrossFit malarkey. And it's
Yeah.
like, say what you will about the coaching and the what they're doing. I fucking hate it. But the way that they show up for each other and support each other and like welcome everyone in, I'm just like, that is what a culture should be, and that's how it should be built. And like one of the tasks while I was at UW, we had to do a presentation on something that we don't necessarily agree or believe in, but we have to be for it. And I was like,
Mhm.
fucking CrossFit. But like, so I started like deep diving into this, into CrossFit and like the culture and the acceptability. And it's just like, that is phenomenal because it's getting people that don't otherwise like to work out in, and in a support system that's like developing them.
Yeah. And that's the thing that made CrossFit so big. It was not the fact that it was CrossFit. It was the fact that they were building something that was bigger than themselves. They were building a concept that people could buy into and feel a part of. They were building a I'm looking for the word right now to try and explain it, but they were building a network and an idea that was bigger than themselves to quote unquote fight for in your little hour session of whatever you were doing, right? And when you do that, it's no different than when you go to war, right? It's like you're fighting for your country, you're fighting for freedom, you're fighting for, like liberty and justice and like all of these concepts that are so much bigger than just fighting for, you know, to win. And I
Mm,
think that in sport, that's so important because, yeah, everyone wants to win. Are you going to win all the time? No. So you have to continue to find something that you fight for on a day to day basis, and the wins will come,
100%.
right? So, and I think the biggest thing that I've taken away with building the culture here with the guys is a quote that I actually read out of The Art of War.
Mm,
Because keep in mind, if you kind of look at it from this lens, football sport is kind of like war, right? So there's this quote, and it says, uh, treat your men like you would your own beloved sons, and they will follow you into any battle." And so that's just the
international.
approach. Yeah, like it's like, oh shit, like that's a little different, right? Like when you know that the guy next to you is willing to do whatever for you and you're willing to do whatever for him, then that's a little bit different. And I think that's what the boys kind of perceive in me as like I will go to whatever length I need to go to make them successful, and they're going to walk through any brick wall for me,
Mm,
right? They're going to get under any barbell that I tell them to, and they're going to move it. And that's just different when you're fighting for people and you're fighting for a concept that and a pride that involves people around you. It's just different
mm.
instead of just fighting to win.
Yeah. What are some of the concepts that you utilize in building their program for the weight room?
So a lot of the programs obviously come from our head coach down, but I reinforce a lot of these concepts by this word that we use and was developed by our leaders called brotherhood.
Mm,
And it's kind of funny because obviously I'm not a boy, but I'm part of the brotherhood, right? Because we are all going towards the same goal. Like, yes, I'm a strength and conditioning coach and I'm in there to make you bigger, better, faster, stronger. But I'm also going towards this goal that we're fighting for together with you guys. I might not be on the field with you, but guess what? I'm in the sidelines in Club Rice making sure that you know I'm hyped so that you can do what you got to do and you can hit the shit out of the motherfucker. We're all taking on our part. And I think when you, even within that word of brotherhood, I've taken my little piece of it and really owned my little piece of it. And I expect that out of the boys too, to take their little piece of that and apply it to what that means in the weight room, whether that means spotting your boy and making sure that he's encouraged after failing on a set, or going down the way and teaching a freshman how to actually make sure that he's being held accountable to his stuff, right? And that's bred from almost the bottom down. It's or the
mm,
bottom up, excuse me. It's not from me down. It's bred from the bottom up. And that's what this place has done a really great job in is, yeah, we set the standard, but they almost take it and run with it themselves. And that's why we call our building a player led team. And
mm.
it's been really cool to see the boys take pride in that and actually like almost hold us to that standard as well and keep us in the brotherhood as well.
Yeah. Can we talk about Coach Mo's Instagram?
Oh gosh, that was a hard switch over. Good lord. Yes, we could talk
I'm
about Coach
sorry, but
Instagram.
we this is related because again, it comes from that leader confidence, like the work that you put in to making yourself a professional, and like again, it speaks to that way that you are holding each other up, and like really making sure that if you're going to do something, you're going to do it to the best of ability. It may sound like a 180, but it is related, I promise.
No, no, I see where you're going with it. I'm with you. So yeah, that was kind of the big thing when I first started in this industry. Because keep in mind, I'd come from a place in college where I was overweight. I was an outcast. I, was struggling and making like the self identity thing, right? And everyone goes through their quote unquote midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, and that turning point in your life, and whether you say, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to continue to throw a pity party for myself and I'm going to continue down this road and, who knows where it's going to lead. Or I can make a fucking decision and I can turn and I can go in the direction and I can become the version of myself that I always wanted to be. And one of the things that I did was actually used visualization and manifestation
Mm,
as a huge tool for me. So my Instagram was, and my personal brand was actually something that I manifested from a very early uh, development stage in my career. And this, if I could close my eyes 5 years ago, this is the Instagram that I would have envisioned myself having, is basically like promoting who I am, not being afraid of who I am, having a little bit of class and a little bit of edge and individuality. Like I not only have stuff from the weight room on there, I've got game day outfits on there. I've got my cowboy hat in there. I've got just random ass light shit in there, but it's promoting me and who I am, my brand. And I hope that the boys would look at that and be like, man, she's a fucking dog. But I also hope that young women will look at that and be like, that is everything that I would want to be when I grow up. And that was the big thing that I struggled with as a young female strength coach in this industry. I didn't have that. I didn't have a strong female mentor where I was like, wow, I want to be like her one day, like I didn't have that. So I had to create that for myself. And I think that's really at the root of it all where my social media, my brand comes from, is because A, like I don't give a fuck. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be authentic and not a lot's going to change that about me because I'm just going to live my truth. And that's between me and God. And that's just one thing that I've really developed over this past
mm.
couple of years.
I'll tell you a story at the end of the podcast. Um, but it's like I think this is what a lot of coaches struggle with in this industry is like if you look on Instagram and TikTok and whatever social media platform you want to see, you will see the shittest coaches coaching. Because like again, coaches that I look up to aren't on social media. Like they are not. But like now we're kind of getting into this era where the fucking good S&C coaches are starting to make content. We hate it, but we are because we are now becoming aware that that's how we can put out there the information that's actually needed for people to develop.
Yeah, and I think you gotta take it with a grain of salt, right? Like there's a lot of S&C coaches out there that put out S&C content all the time, and half the time you're looking at it and you're like, why would you take the time and use that? Now, that's not me hating by any means. To every strength coach has their own way of programming, and it's not wrong. That's the nice thing about strength and conditioning, and honestly, the cool thing about strength and conditioning is that there are so many ways to slice the cake, and there's no
Ooh,
wrong way to slice the cake.
not
Like there's what's up?
I've never heard the cake. I've always heard the cat.
Slice a cat.
No, no, skin the cat.
Oh my god! Oh, skin the cat. I see what you're saying. But yes, there's so many ways to like slice the pie, slice the cake, skin the cat, whatever you want to say, right?
I like the cake. Yeah.
As my cat sits in the background and he's like, what are you guys talking about? But yeah, like that's the cool thing about strength and conditioning. But I think with the social media and the development of social media these days, it's been a great insight into the individuality of strength and conditioning.
Mm,
Like I don't have too many videos or pictures on my Instagram of specific training styles that I do just because like that's not my brand. That's not what I'm trying to focus on. But when I see videos of other people doing other things, I'm like,
mm,
how can I implement that into my program? And I think that that's just the new age of strength and conditioning. And I would very much agree with you. I think there's good and bad to that. And a lot of my mentors are not on social media as well. But I think in this day and age, especially where football is going and where athletics is going, I think you're silly as a coach to not promote your own brand and promote who you are to try and keep up with the times, right? Because if you're not keeping up with the times, then you're falling behind.
Yeah. And like that's exactly what like obviously I'm in this space, so I kind of have to do content, but like I despise it. I hate having to sit for like a whole day just like trying to figure these posts out and scheduling them and oh, hate it. But like the thing that I love about your Instagram is like it just screams like a confidence and be like a coach that fucking cares about more than just the mission of winning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was a large and well, and thank you first of all. I appreciate the nice compliment. But I think that was the big thing when I started the game day outfits because I did them last year. I remember posting my first one and I was like, oh, I'm so nervous about what everyone's gonna think. And I did that for a couple weeks, and then at some point I was just like, I don't know why I'm tripping. Like I don't know why I'm freaking out so much about something that's so little and has such good meaning behind it, because at the end of the day what I meant to do with that is not only promote my individuality and my, I guess, feminine side, right? Because I do have a very feminine side. I appreciate fashion, I appreciate those types of things, but also showing women out there that yes, you can absolutely go and you can be a badass in the weight room, you can be a badass on the field, but you can also have the own this idea of being feminine and
Mm,
having a feminine side to you. I had female mentors in the past that almost tried to like hide that, and they would hide the fact that they were female or hide their female interests or what they did like outside of the building, or not dress in a female type fashion. And it almost kind of like didn't rub me the wrong way, but it was just sad because I
mm,
was like, I like you should be able to do that, and you can do it in a classy way. So that's my saying is like stay classy, right? Like I oh, what movie is that from? Anchorman. Stay classy, San
mhm.
Diego.
So
Um,
like one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to reach out, I was like the fucking cowboy hat is fucking sick, and we spoke about this, but it's like it's so authentically Texas that I'm just like this is fucking sick.
Yeah, and I like it's so cool too because the company that I partner with that gave me my hat this year is called the Hat Store in Houston, Texas. Please, this is a slight plug, but if you're in the area and you want a good cowboy hat, please head over there and tell them you're with Coach Mo and they'll get you hooked up. But I went to them and I was like, listen, I want to create a cowboy hat that is going to be representative of the state of Texas, of who I am, but also the university that I work for. And they gave me this denim dark blue felt hat. And I was like, this is unreal. And they branded rice into the back of it. And it has been kind of like part of my personal brand. And when I was doing my visualization and as an early strength and conditioning coach, that's one thing that I wanted to do was be authentically Texan no matter where I was as a strength coach and represent the great state slash country that I'm from. But yes, exactly. And they did a great job shaping the hat. They took me through the entire process. He reshaped it a couple times for me. And I'm telling you, when he burned rice into the back of the hats, I've never seen someone be more specific. So now every time I go in there to get my hat reshaped, I don't even have to tell him what I want anymore. He's like, "Don't worry, I got it," and he shapes it exactly how I want it to a T. And I'm very particular about those things. Just coming from Texas and growing up in a Texas environment, like I'm very particular about my hat and how it's supposed to look. But again, it's just become part of the brand. And now everywhere I
Mhm.
go, when I meet new strength coaches or meet new athletes, they're like, "Where's the cowboy hat? Where's the cowboy hat?" I went over to the pool the other day for my swimmers and they were like, "Oh no, where's your cowboy hat?" Like, it's just cool, right? It's fun. It's something that adds to what we were talking about earlier, developing.
Mhm. And I think like not just culture as well, but like to be in this industry, you constantly have to develop yourself. And like I never heard about coaching and what we're doing in this way, but like Thomas Newman was like, we are professional coaches. Like we are elite coaches. And I was like, yeah, we are. Like we coach very high levels, but we're not classified as professional coaches. Like we're professionals, but we're not professional coaches. And it's that thing where like, and as well, like Thomas said, like by doing a podcast, you inheritedly are getting your own PhD because like you're speaking to so many coaches, and like to me, I was just like, I'm just chilling with coaches speaking, getting some information. But he's like, no, look at it as an educational piece. Like you are getting a PhD and A, talking to people, and B, like you're finding out different ways and methods of coaching, of running a program, of developing an athlete, yourself, your brand. So like there's so many pieces of the pie. And like I had a call with Coach Mac 2 days ago, and he and I was honest with him. I was like, I have never been comfortable with the business side of this industry. But like this year, like this year alone has been the most business I've ever learned in all my life. And it wasn't that like I sought it out. I was forced to like learn the business side of it this year. And it's like it's those experiences that then like when you are like running programs and leading and you are the head guy, you're kind of like every experience has shaped me to be where I am.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful that you look at it that way because I think a lot of coaches too get to a point where they're like, okay, I am in this spot. What I know is what I know. Like
Mm,
I work for coaches that are like, oh, well, I've always done it this way. We're just going to continue to do it this way. And I think you bring up a great point of like, you have to learn these different things. Like, you have to go out and learn the business side of strength and conditioning. You have to learn. I mean, Coach Newman used to always tell us in our internship, like, the weight room's a theater and you're putting on a huge performance. So make it a good one, right? You
mm.
know, and I think in one of your other podcasts that I was listening to, you were talking about a strength coach who took theater classes.
Yes, Sachin. I was actually just about to say that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think what, like you said, speaks volumes in that, right? Like the fact that he went out and took theater classes to get better as a strength and conditioning coach is unreal because most strength and conditioning coaches would just be like, well, I just coach this way and that's how I'm going to coach. And that
yeah.
just doesn't sit well with me, right? Like it's funny because I tell people or I'll tell my boys, like I used to be a cheerleader in high school. I was captain of the cheer squad in high school, actually. And they all laugh at me, but I think being a cheerleader in high school actually gave me a huge edge to my personality as a coach because I'm loud, I'm boisterous, I'm flamboyant. You know, like I have no problem being up in front of people and putting on, as Coach Newman says, a show.
Mm,
So I think that you're absolutely right in that. And I think that it's beautiful that you do that because if you're constantly in this place where you think that you've hit the top or peaked,
hmm.
you're wrong, right?
And that's the thing as well. It's like I've and it's been mentioned so many times on this podcast, but it's that you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's like it doesn't matter if it's like Sachin, he went and did acting classes. As a strength coach, that's probably the most awkward thing that we can do because it's not us. We have to pretend it's not us. It's like I am who I am. Leave me the fuck alone. I so me and my partner were actually having this conversation the other day, and it's like I always ask a lot of questions, like a lot of questions, and it's not that I'm trying to be annoying. It's like I'm trying to figure out what they do and like seeing where it crosses over. Like what can I use from their industry, their specific niche that I can use and apply for my own thing. And I kind of mentioned this the other day, but the rubber duck theory, and it's like this little rubber duck. I have it in every desk that I've ever owned, and it's that thing of anything I do, I speak to that duck and explain my way through it, and it's that thing of like if I can make sense of it and tell someone else or tell a specific object, then I'm kind of like debugging the issues that could go wrong or the issues that could potentially arise and how I would deal with them. And it's that continuous progress of like learning and knowing more and doing more so that I can make sure that I have as many pieces as possible to guide someone to the best decision that they can make.
Yeah, so with that, I'm curious to know what your coaching philosophy is then.
Very athlete centric. So if an athlete comes in, he's had dog shit sleep, dog shit nutrition, like he's just came in fucking bummed out. I'm not going to do my 80% RPE with them or rep max with them. I'll take the 80% and just give me 80% of what you can do today, right? Because that's still 80%. I'm getting my 80%. He's still moving. He's still working out. We're doing it in a way that's not going to get them to burn out. So I think a lot of my decisions is based on who I have in the weight room, and it's very principle based. Like my programming, and like I said this on the podcast with Thomas Newman, and he was like, "Yeah, that's flexible periodization, like undulating, flexible, whatever you want to call it. It is what it is." Like, and his book, and I'll get it up. It's just always here because like I'm constantly like going through it and making notes, and like if I'm programming, I'm undulating. Like that gives me freedom to either push them when I need to or bring it back when I need to. If I have a hard week programmed, but and I do this more so with the female athletes, and I think I mentioned that my research is more focused into um, female athletes and their menstrual cycles and how that all those fluctuation of hormones impact the athlete. Like if they're just started their period, I'm not going to give them a super hard week. I'm just not. So I'm going to adapt and make do with what they're presenting to me. It's like it's adaptability, and like again, our job is to look after the athlete. So like I'm very principle based because of that. This yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because I think that a lot of coaches tend to miss that. Where I've been asked many times, like, what's your coaching philosophy? And that I think they're expecting me to come back and be like, well, I value this type of training and this, percentage based system, this triphasic, this, blah, 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 blah. And I sit there and I'm like, okay, my biggest issue with this is, do you actually know what the definition of philosophy is? And they're like, well, no. Like, do you know what the definition of philosophy is?
Something that you base your I don't want to make it very general, but it's like it's what you base your program off, like your belief systems on how to achieve that certain thing.
So go one step further for me because let's take the coaching out of it. Let's just talk about specifically philosophy. What do you think the specific definition of philosophy is?
Your belief and thought process.
So it's actually the love of wisdom.
Oh,
So, by definition, if you're
lightning.
asking me what my coaching philosophy is, then my coaching philosophy is my love of wisdom of coaching, right?
I
So,
like.
yeah, exactly. And when I started doing like a little bit more diving into this, because I actually love philosophy, I took a bunch of classes on philosophy in college, and there's multiple different areas of philosophy. But the big one that you want to focus on is epistemology, which is basically the understanding of like why, right? The understanding of knowledge and of love and those types of things. And the true definition of philosophy is a love of wisdom. So if that's the case, then my philosophy for coaching is fluid. I'm
Hmm.
always looking for the next piece of information, the next piece of wisdom, the next piece of understanding. So no different than what you say. It's very principle based, right? My athlete comes in and his girlfriend just broke up with him. Okay, probably not going to get the best thing out of you today. We probably need to have more of a conversation and then hit this type of lift.
Day by five
Or
hugs.
yes, exactly. Like those types of things. Or, you know, in practice, a coach gets after one of my athletes. He's on the sideline. He's angry, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? That's a cortisol spike in the body that's blocking dopamine and norepinephrine in his body. He's not going to be able to go out there and make decisions. I'm going to walk up to him and make him laugh, spike his dopamine in his body. You know, those are the types of things as a coach. And so when someone looks at me and asks for my coaching philosophy, I'm like, it's fluid. And they're like, well, what does
Mm.
that mean? I'm like, it's fluid. I can do I can do triphasic. I can, go through the undulating. I can do all of that. We can go through percentage based. We can use that force velocity training. We can do all of these fancy things. But at the end of the day, what you have to understand about a coaching philosophy is that it has to be fluid.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and yeah, like you're 100% like, and I've always mentioned this. Like, if an athlete comes in and he's broke up with his girlfriend, no amount of hoorah, no amount of you have to push this way because I'm telling you, they don't. The chances are they're going to kick back and they're probably going to hate you afterwards. Then have fun programming for them because like they don't give a fuck. Like they will not do it. They don't like you. You made them, and it's. I've mentioned this before. It's like at the end of the day, I want my athletes to know that I have an open door philosophy. Like if you break up with your girlfriend or she breaks up with you, you have a fight with your mom, your dad, my door is open. Come speak. I will. The conversation won't go past this. Chances are, I'm going to rip into you. We're going to laugh, and I'm going to make you feel better because you are now a part of this system, and this is how we're going to do things. Like I don't care if you've had the shittest day of your life. I will make you laugh. Like I don't care how silly it is. I remember like it was kind of like a weird day in the weight room, and we were doing hip thrusts, and I was like, "Cadell, you've had some practice." They fucking burst out laughing, and I was like, "I've won this battle."
Right. It's just like the little things. And I mean, like, in my opinion, if you don't know how to manage relationships with people, then you're not a good coach to begin with. But also, like,
So
on the flip side of it, oh, go ahead.
no, no. So this is why I value Gen Pop experience so much. As like you have no other option but to speak to them and develop those soft skills and ask how their daughter is. Like you just have to because you're going to get the most out of them if you do. And it's like it's these little pieces that really develop you as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, like on the flip side of it, understanding that in your coaching philosophy, you have to be able to adapt, right? So I'm not going to train my quarterbacks the way that I'm training my specialists. I'm not going to train my specialists the way that I train my O linemen, right? Like being able to go through and look at your program and having that self reflecting ability of saying, this is not working. I'm going to make the adjustment on the fly. I'm going to do this and that.
Mhm.
When, oh, well, we did this last year and it worked. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if this is what we did last year and it worked. The amount of times that I've changed my swim program to adapt to those girls so that those girls can be the best that they can be, I've done it a handful of times. And if you can't do that as a coach, then that is your biggest downfall because that's ignorance, right? That is
Yep.
ignorance. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's made my program, especially with my swimmers and divers, work really well because it's not about me, it's about them.
100%. Like this is where then that discussion becomes of like, yeah, but we were taught this at university or college, or this research paper said this, and you're kind of like, yeah, but if you think about it, all the variables were controlled. All the athletes were expected to be 100%. All athletes were this, and this. Everything was controlled. Now injury prevention, right? Fucking bollocks. You can't prevent an injury. You can mitigate some of the side effects of it, but you can't prevent it. Like if someone's going to take your ACL out from like a side tackle, it's going to happen whether you did your fucking walk around the world or whatever it is, right? Like it's going to happen. So it's like research is a good starting point, and it's good to develop these principles, we'll say, but then you kind of have to be like, okay, this shit did not work. Like I wanted to do strength based five fives for 6 weeks. That ain't fucking working. There's so many injuries. What am I going to do? Am I
Right.
going to stick it out or pivot?
Right.
I'll fucking pivot every single time. I would rather
Right.
say I was wrong than cause more harm.
1000%. And let's talk about the fact that college and like the type of program that I was in and the type of program that I was looking for. And most strength and conditioning coaches that I talk to say that their undergraduate degrees and their master's degrees did not prepare them whatsoever for being a strength coach. Internships did. So that's the big thing that I sell to most young coaches is like, I didn't start internships until I was done my undergraduate degree. So I was almost behind the eight ball trying to catch up and learn all these things. So what I do now is I push to young coaches while you're getting your undergraduate degree, go intern, go be involved. You are in a living lab every day and there's no control group.
Hmm.
There's no control. And guess what? You only get so many hours with these athletes and you only have so much time with them. 4 years is not a long time in the grand scheme of things, right? You got to make it happen now. It's result based and you got to find a way to make it happen now. And that's why I love it because it's challenging. And if you, I think you probably picked this up about me at this point. If there's something that I love, it is a good challenge.
And I love these like I kind of mentioned at the start of the podcast. I get really fucking addicted, and my partner hates it. I get very addicted to like puzzle games on my phone. I don't know, like I'll wake up and like, okay, I've got to do a puzzle because like for me in my head, that just fires it fucking up, and I'm just like, let's go. But like it gets to a point where I spend a little bit too much time on it. But it's like I'm always developing that thing of I have to do something to keep my brain engaged. If that brain isn't engaged, I'm bored out of my mind.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you say that because there's actually a cognitive tool. It's called cognitive priming. And that's essentially what you're doing is you're
Mm.
priming your brain to take in information for the day. We actually do that with our quarterbacks here. They get on the VR before they practice or before they go in for a game, and they do a bunch of different cognitive tasks like eye tracking, impulse control games to actually get their mind firing and prepared to take in information. So that's essentially what you're doing. You can just tell your partner that you're just cognitively preparing for the day, and that's might sound a little bit
Leave
better
me
than you're
alone.
playing games.
No, I really appreciate you for coming on today. Um, if you let people know where they can find you, I have put the Instagram up, but if you let people know how they can find you and speak and get asking some questions too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can absolutely reach out to me on Instagram. It's underscore Mo underscore Tibate. I answer DMs. I answer emails too. You can go on the Rice University website and find my email on there. I'm always open to have conversations. And like I said, I love a good challenge question. So if you want to bring something to the table that we can talk about, I'm all about it.
Perfect. I would also love to get more into the science of things. So we definitely need to run this back again.
Yes, absolutely. We could spend some time talking about the science of things. And as you can tell, I have no problem running down the little rabbit holes. I am a product of Thomas Newman. So,
Ah, this is something that we speak about so much. It's like, so he's actually presenting at the webinar I'm putting on the 6th of December, and he's like, "How long do I have?" I was like, "You have an hour," and by an hour I mean you have 50 minutes, and you have 10 minutes for questions. And I was like, "Okay, so I can't go off on tangents." I was like, "No, no, you can't."
no rabbit holes. No, no rabbit holes allowed. Oh my gosh. And I catch myself doing that all the time. And I think to myself, I'm like, my years at Yale are coming back. Like, I'm just running down. As soon as I see a rabbit hole, it's just like down I go.
This is actually a conversation I had with Rachel, and it's like you need to give him like specifics, like give him as many specifics as possible. Like don't let him go off.
Oh yeah, because then you're like, what's the original question we asked? And like we
But
both
see,
are gonna be like,
I find that more beneficial than just like pointed questions. Like if I'm expecting like, so say if I ask like what's your principle for developing the bench press, right? And you rattle off like your script for that answer. But then like in the back of my head, I've always got more questions. But like I'm in an interview, so I can only ask that question and I move on. But like that to me doesn't work because I'm like, yeah, but why? Yeah,
yeah,
but why?
exactly. Or if someone just rattled off a principle to you without saying, well, what time of the year is it? Who am I
Mm,
training? What's the goal? What are we trying to do? Uh, what kind of rack do I have? Do I
mm,
have kabuki bars? Do I have a straight bar? Do I have a duffalo bar? Like, what do I have access to? There's so many layers to that. And if they're not, if they're just saying, oh, well, I just roll with a 5x5 and that's what I do, that'll tell you a lot about a person too, right?
mm.
They're pretty narrow-minded in the way that they think instead of saying like, hang on, do I have a tendo attached to the bar and can I force velocity curve this? Like, what can I do? Like, I think that's, to your point, going down those rabbit holes and asking those types of questions that expand upon the actual
Mhm.
thought process or question. I think that's what elicits good conversation.
100%. And for me, I love the principle of it depends. Like this yesterday, this was a real example yesterday. I was at a friend's gym and someone came in and they were like, I'm thinking about getting a weight belt. What belt do I get? I was like, you're going to hate this answer, but it depends. A, what are you using it for? B, are you what are you using it for? Like as in like what type of lifting they're using it for? And like what are you hoping to get out of it, like why are you wanting a belt? And like he was like, oh, I'm doing like deadlift, bench, deadlift, squat. I was like, okay, so it's more weightlifting belts, so you want a bit thicker band. And then like I just rattled off like the all it depends that goes into it, and he was like, okay, that makes sense. But it's like it depends, it's a cop out answer, but not if you explain why it depends.
See, and I would even like disagree with you. I think the it depends is incredibly important. I don't think it's a cop out at all because it opens the door to understanding truthfully what you're asking.
Hmm.
You know,
But like
everyone's
that's
like, "Oh, that's a
it
cop out." Like,
depends. It depends. Like so I say it's a cop out because like a lot of people hear it depends and they're like, oh, you just don't want to give me an answer. I was like, no. But like let me explain why it depends. Like I always explain the why it depends afterwards.
yeah, it was like no different with my swimmers the other day. We were talking about belting up for our last couple sets of squat. They're working up towards a really heavy week next week, and so we had a couple singles this week, and we introduced the belt. And a lot of the girls were like, "Well, do I need the belt?" And I'm like, "Well, it depends. Do you feel like you need the belt?" Well, what do I need the belt for? And I'm like, well, if you're on your last set and you feel like you're not strong through your center, you should probably belt up. Well, I feel like I'm strong through the center. Well, then you probably don't need a belt. I would rather you trade without a belt. Well, then why would you introduce the belt to us if you don't want us to train with the belt? I'm like, because it depends. It
Hmm.
depends on the person. It depends on the weight that they're doing. I would rather you belt up if it's going to keep you safe. But if you have the core strength to wear the
To do
belt or not wear the belt, you might as well not wear the belt. It depends.
that's exactly what I said to him.
Exactly. And you're like, and then people sit there and they don't know what to do with that kind of information. But that's the thing is like, if you're asking questions as a guy that loves to ask questions, if you're giving a straightforward answer, then in my opinion, that's pretty ignorant. You got to
Mhm.
be able to have the conversation that expands to the multiple points and the multiple different lenses that you could look at the situation through. And I think
Yeah.
that's my philosophy mind coming in, right?
I was just about to say that. I was like, that's philosophy 101.
Like by existential bullshit, people are like, stop it. I just wanted a yes or no. And I'm like, well, like, have you thought about it this way? And they're like, Mo, I just wanted a yes or no.
Yeah, I have that issue a lot.
But that's what makes you so good at doing this podcast. And it's been really awesome to like be on here and listen to your perspectives on things and have you carry me through this conversation and others through these conversations, right? You do a great job at asking really good questions that shine light into areas of strength and conditioning and this field that I think a lot of people would like more insight on. And I think that's
Mm.
something that you do a really, really good job on.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I think like for me, it's just like I speak and like I record it, and I don't really think much about it. I just like speak, but like it's and like this is more recently as well. Like I've had a lot of love from the podcast. I'm just like, this is weird. Like I'm just speaking to another person. Like it's all we're doing. We're just talking about coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's cool though because knowledge is power. And there was a point in time where you had to go to a library or travel really
Mhm,
far to get information or knowledge was only based off of people telling you things by word of mouth. We have so much access to knowledge nowadays, and it's almost like overwhelming on like what's really important and what's not. And I think by you talking to professionals in this industry and shining light on what information is actually important and what's
mhm.
not is also a really cool perspective that I love about your podcast.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And it's like I I have like this thing where like I still think like I'm a small kid from my neighborhood. So like being able to like speak to so many like people in America, like my 12-year-old self, I'll be like, whoa, you get to do that for a living? I go, that's fucking sick. But now, like, I'm just like, I get to do it. And it's like, this is just people coming on, speaking, spending an hour of our time or like however long it is. And we're just like connecting and like speaking about things that we both love and different nuances to that thing. I always go back to this example. It's like, I can teach a squat for posterior chain, but you can teach it for core control. But like, the way that we can effectively come together and speak about it and learn from each other is what makes coaching education important, and like why we should do it and not be like, this is my way works, this is the only way that's ever going to work. If you've got a different opinion, you're fucking wrong. Well, no, like we can learn from each other. Like there's this saying in Portuguese and it's like it's translated to, you can learn something from everyone, even a dumb person. You can learn not to be them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think there's a quote by Socrates, my philosophy coming in back in again. But he says, the only true knowledge is knowing that you know nothing.
And that's exactly every time I get someone on the podcast, I feel like I know fuck all.
But that's the thing is that you are not ignorant to the fact that there's more to learn, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, I know a lot of things. I've had a lot of years of experience, and the way that I do it has worked in the past, so I'm not going to change that. It's like there is so much to learn out there, and you always have to be a student of your craft and
Yep.
always evolving with the times, with these athletes, with these kids, like with the programs that are coming out. And the better and better you get at evolving with that, the better you become as a coach, right? Being
Hmm.
ignorant to knowledge is basically like exactly the opposite of what Socrates was talking about. And I think it's actually there's another quote by Aristotle where he says like ignorance is the biggest enemy of men.
Like, I think it would be very easy to like always have people agree with you, but like that's to me, it's not fun because like, yes, I've been in S&C since I was 13. Like I started lifting at 13 under a coach. So like obviously like I've done my fair stint of coaching and lifting, but like I always feel like there is still more to learn. There is people that, and like again going back to that principle base, is like we spoke about triphasic 531 or Angeline periodization, you've got French contrast, whatever your vice is, like they are all great for that program. But like my program is different. So what can I use from these little methodologies or principles that I can then take into my program and make it work for my athletes? The boisterous stuff, the rah-rahs, can't always be done in European countries. Very reserved across here. So like if I'm going to yell at someone's face, like I better make sure that they like it. Because if they don't, then they're like, "Who the fuck is this guy, and why is he shouting at me? Like, what am I doing wrong?" But it's like it's that culture as well. It's like you have to figure out like what principles you need, what culture you have, and like who you have in.
Yeah, and I think that's also where a large portion of sports science has come in and kind of like shined a huge light on how just doing it one way is not ideal, right? I think sports science, like, so I'm largely sports science in the way that I approach programming. If I have a skeleton program that I've put together that all my athletes are on and only 30% of them are responding to the program, then guess what? The other 70% are going on another program. And when part of those 30% are no longer responding to the program, then we adjust the program, right? Like everything is done in conjunction with sports science, but is sports science king? No. It's a nice balance of both because I'm a strength coach that finds value in sports science, but I also find value in the bro science.
Hmm. Oh
Sometimes
yeah,
just getting under a bar and moving heavy weight is just what you got to do.
that's why I love Coach AJ so much. Is like he is the biggest meathead you will ever find, but he can back it up with science. And like watching him lift, you're like, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, and I think you're silly nowadays to not find the value in both, right? Like
Mhm.
taking the sports science and validating your bro science, but also taking bro science and really pushing the bro science, right? Or the sports science, excuse me. And being able to have that like nice give and take of both is really, really important because at the end of the day, before sports science was ever a thing, people were getting the job done.
Mhm.
People were doing strength and conditioning no different and getting great results out of it, right? And I think sports science can take us to that next level, but you got to use it in an effective manner. You can't always use it as like a scapegoat for certain things. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of coaches tend to use it for that.
100%. What is some advice that you would give new S&C coaches or coaches coming into the industry? Be fluid.
Oh, um, so this is my motto that I've been using as of late because, just recently I went back, played a game in Connecticut, and obviously that's where my coaching career kind of started at Yale. And I've just been kind of having some full circle moments over the past couple of years on, standing on the sidelines of bowl games and like sitting there and realizing like I used to dream about this and holy fuck, I'm standing on the sidelines of a bowl game and I used to dream about, and having all these full circle moments. But none of that would have happened if I would have stopped.
Mm,
And I think back on all the things that I gave up in order to get here, and I would do it all again. And I think that's what a lot of people miss is that it's not what you're willing to do to be successful, it's what you're willing to sacrifice.
mm,
I've missed a lot of family things. I've missed a lot of birthdays, parties, friends, events. I've missed, you know, Christmases. I've missed those types of things. I've sold everything that I've owned multiple times and moved across the country multiple times. I've lived, like when I was in California, I lived in a travel nursing home, and my roommate would drive me to work on days that I felt nervous to bike to work. Like when I was in Connecticut, I lived in that 3 bedroom, 1 bath home with 5 people. The boys literally had a divider in the living room and divided up the living room to afford to live there. And I'd do it all again. I would sacrifice it all again to get here. You have to keep,
mm.
you're not going to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's okay because one day out of nowhere the light's going to show up and you're going to be like, let's fucking go. This is what I've been like working so hard for and for so long. You have to keep
1000%. I retweet it.
retweet.
No, I really do appreciate you for coming on, and we need to run this back.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, we've done this what 2 or 3 times now, having
Yeah.
the this conversation due to technical difficulties. So I'm sure we'll
Although
have plenty more to talk about.
the first one was a 3 hour conversation, and that was just on the phone.
Yes, yes, it was.
Yeah. No,
Just
I
talking
really.
nothing but bullshit too, just about random ass shit. It was awesome.
That's what I love about this too. Is like, like I have Funko Pops at the back. Like, let's fucking talk about those. I have comic books there. Let's fucking talk about those too. Like it's like or the balls as well. Like I fucking love all this shit.
And you have to have those little memories, and it's fun because the cowboy hats, I actually get a new one done every year. And so the past 2 years, I have two cowboy hats from each year. And then when we went to a bowl game, I got the bowl game branded into the
Mm,
hat, and then I got the year that we had it. So every year from now until the day I stop coaching, I will have a cowboy hat, and I can't wait to be like, anti Coach Mo. I go over there and I'm like, well, this hat was from 2024 when we went to the blah 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 blah, and that at that bowl we won against this school, and they're like, okay, we're tired of hearing the story, the war memories, no, Auntie Mo. I can't wait for those days, right? And you got to find value in those little things. So I commend you
100%.
for the balls and for the memory things that you keep.
100%. No, appreciate you. Peace.